I had always been the quiet one, the one who didn't make a fuss, who didn't rock the boat. I spent most of my life floating under the radar in my family, living in the shadow of louder, more demanding personalities. But everything changed when I turned 19. I had always been close to my family. But the older I got, the more I started to feel like I didn't quite belong. My parents' marriage was a mess, and every argument felt like it was designed to draw me into their chaos. But I stayed silent. I stayed out of it. It was easier to just let things unfold around me. But one night, that all changed. It started as any other evening. Dinner was cold and quiet, as usual. My dad had been working late, and my mom had been on the phone all evening. I retreated to my room, lost in a book, trying to escape the tension in the house. And that's when it happened. The next thing I remember, I was lying in a hospital bed. I don't remember the accident. I don't remember how I got there. I don't remember anything before the sharp, sterile white lights above me. But I knew something wasn't right. I knew my family wasn't there. I tried to sit up, my head pounding like a drum. It felt like every inch of me was bruised, sore, and tender. The nurse saw me stir, and she quickly rushed to my side. "Take it easy," she said softly. "You've been through a lot." Through a lot? What did that mean? Why wasn't anyone here? She told me I had been in a car accident. I had been unconscious for nearly a week. My mind raced with questions, but one stood out above all the rest. Why had my family not come? I thought about my parents, my siblings. Where were they? It wasn't until a few days later, when I finally had a moment to check my phone, that I saw the truth. A message from my mom. She had posted something on Facebook about me. "We haven't heard from her. She's gone. Disappeared. She's left us." Disappeared? Left us? The anger, the confusion, the betrayal, it hit me like a ton of bricks. I stared at the screen in disbelief. They hadn't even come to see me. Instead, they had chosen to tell the world that I had run away. Had they even checked the hospital? Had they even looked for me? That night, lying in a hospital bed alone, I vowed to myself I would find out the truth. And I would remember everything. The days that followed in the hospital were a blur. The doctors and nurses checked on me regularly, but no one explained why my family wasn't there. I was alone in this sterile, white room, drifting in and out of sleep. It felt like time had stopped, and yet I could feel the walls closing in around me. But I couldn't stay silent any longer. Something didn't add up. My mind kept racing, and the more I thought about what happened before the accident, the more questions piled up. Had I really run away, or had something far worse been kept from me? One night, the nurse came in with some paperwork I needed to sign for my discharge. She seemed distracted, almost uncomfortable, but I didn't care about that. I needed answers. "Do you know why my family hasn't visited?" I asked, my voice soft but firm. She froze, glancing at me with wide eyes. I wasn't sure if she thought I was being paranoid or if she knew something I didn't, but she didn't answer immediately. She cleared her throat and then spoke quietly. "Your family, they've been in touch with the hospital. They said they were giving you space after everything. They didn't want to upset you." I stared at her. They didn't want to upset me? I've been unconscious for days, and they didn't want to check on me? What kind of family does that? Her face fell, and she glanced down at her clipboard. She didn't have an answer. Instead, she excused herself quickly, leaving me alone with my thoughts. As soon as the door closed, the reality of it hit me. They had abandoned me. They didn't just leave me physically. They had chosen to rewrite the story for everyone else. They had chosen to paint me as the runaway, as the one who didn't care enough to show up. But I wasn't a runaway. I was just gone. Abandoned, left to fend for myself while they made their stories for the world to believe. I didn't know what to do with that information, but I knew one thing. I couldn't trust them. Not anymore. That night, I sat up in my hospital bed, staring out the window at the city lights below. I wasn't sure what I was supposed to do next. I had no home to return to. My family had essentially cut me off, and now it felt like I was being treated like an outsider in my own life. Then, the thought hit me. I had no one. I had been left with nothing. But I had one thing they couldn't take from me: my memory. I started to remember pieces of what happened before the accident. Snippets. Small flashes of images that didn't make sense at first. My dad's voice, my mom's cold expression, an argument in the kitchen. And then, nothing. The more I remembered, the clearer it became. They had kicked me out. I had been forced out, not because I left, but because they had pushed me away. I wasn't the one who ran, I was the one who was abandoned, just like they'd done when I was a child. And now they had written me off as the problem, as the one who didn't care. I had been left to rot in this hospital bed while they acted like they had no part in any of it. That night, I promised myself I wasn't going to be the victim. I wasn't going to let them control this narrative. I would find out the truth. I would make them face it. The next few days in the hospital were the hardest. I spent most of my time lying awake, unable to ignore the storm of emotions that brewed within me: anger, confusion, betrayal. They all mixed together in a chaotic swirl. I was in a foreign place fighting for my life, but my family was nowhere to be found. They had abandoned me when I needed them most. I couldn't understand it. I tried calling them, but my messages were ignored. My mother's phone went straight to voicemail. My father? He never picked up. It was as if they had completely erased me from their lives. But I knew I couldn't let them get away with it. I had to confront the truth. That's when I made the decision. I would leave the hospital, even though I wasn't fully recovered. I wasn't going to wait for them to come around. I needed to find out what had happened, what they had really done. I wasn't going to be the victim of their lies. I managed to get discharged after a few days, but instead of going back to an empty apartment, I decided to visit my childhood home, the house where all the memories lived, both good and bad. My mind raced as I drove there, wondering what I would find. As I stood outside the house, it seemed like nothing had changed. The same mailbox, the same old oak tree in the yard where we used to play catch. But there was a heaviness in the air, a sense of unfamiliarity. It didn't feel like home anymore. I knocked on the door, my heart pounding. A few seconds passed before my younger brother Jake answered. He looked surprised to see me, and a slight frown formed on his face. "Leah? What are you doing here?" he asked, clearly shocked. "I need to talk to Mom and Dad," I said, my voice steady but my heart beating faster. "Where are they?" He hesitated, glancing over his shoulder as if trying to decide whether to let me in. "They're not home." I felt a wave of frustration wash over me, but I kept it in check. "Jake, I need to know what's going on. Why did they tell everyone I ran away? Why did they leave me in the hospital?" He sighed deeply, his face falling. "I didn't know, Leah. I swear. They said you were angry, that you just left. They said you left us all behind." He looked down, ashamed, as if he knew the truth but didn't have the courage to say it out loud. The words hit me like a ton of bricks. They told him I was the one who ran away? They painted me as the one who didn't care enough to come home, the same way they always did. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. "Jake, I didn't leave. They left me, they abandoned me, and now they're pretending like I didn't matter." Jake's eyes flickered with guilt, and for the first time, he spoke up. "They didn't tell me everything either, but I think they regret it. They've been calling around, trying to get in touch with you. I heard Dad mention that he wants to apologize, but he doesn't know how." I stared at him, disbelief in my eyes. "So, they know what they did?" Jake nodded quietly. "Yeah, I think they do. But they're afraid of what you'll say, afraid you won't forgive them." I couldn't believe it. They knew exactly what they had done to me, and now they were too afraid to face me, too afraid to acknowledge the years of hurt they had caused. It was hard to breathe in that moment. All these years I had been fighting, surviving, but they had been the ones who had created the mess in the first place. They had left me, and now they wanted to fix everything from the sidelines. I felt the anger start to rise again, but I knew it wasn't worth it. They didn't deserve my anger anymore. They had already taken so much from me, but I had the power to move forward. I had already found my strength. Jake, tell them I'll talk to them, but not until they're ready to tell me the truth. The whole truth. He looked at me, his eyes filled with a mixture of sorrow and understanding. I will. I promise. As I turned and walked away, leaving the house behind, I felt a small weight lifting off my shoulders. The truth was finally starting to come to light, and I was starting to realize that I didn't need their approval. I didn't need their excuses or their apologies. I had already done the hard work. I had already rebuilt my life, and now I was ready to move forward. Not for them, not for anyone else, but for me. The next few days passed in a blur. I spent time reflecting on everything that had happened, everything I had been through. The anger, the confusion, the betrayal, they were still there, lingering in the back of my mind. But with every passing moment, I began to realize that I didn't need to hold on to any of it. I was done being a victim of their actions. I was done letting them control my emotions. I received another call from Jake a few days later. This time, his voice sounded different, hesitant, as if he was nervous about what he was about to say. He didn't beat around the bush. "They want to meet," he said. "Mom and Dad, they're ready to talk. They want to apologize." I couldn't help but feel a strange mix of emotions. I wasn't sure if I was ready. Part of me wanted to scream at them, to finally get the answers I deserved. But another part of me, the part that had learned to let go, wondered if it was even worth it. Did I really need to hear their apologies to move on? But one thing was clear. I was in control now, not them. "I'll meet them," I said, my voice steady. "But it has to be on my terms. I won't go back to pretending everything is okay if it's not. They need to be honest with me, Jake. No more excuses." He agreed, and we set a date for the meeting. I was nervous, yes, but more than that, I was curious. I didn't know what I expected from them, but I was ready to hear the truth, whatever it was. I wanted to hear it not for their sake, but for mine. The day of the meeting arrived, and I walked into the small cafe where we had agreed to meet. It was a neutral place, a space where I didn't feel like I was back in the same old house with the same old issues. It was quiet, almost peaceful, a place where I could hear myself think. When my parents walked in, I barely recognized them. My mom looked older, more tired. My dad's once firm posture had slouched, his face lined with years of regret. They weren't the same people who had left me behind in a foreign country. They sat down across from me, and there was an awkward silence. My mom fidgeted with her napkin, and my dad stared at his coffee. The tension in the air was thick, like a cloud that hadn't cleared in years. I didn't say anything. I was giving them space to speak, giving them room to face the consequences of their actions. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, my mom spoke. "Leah," she started, her voice barely above a whisper, We didn't know what we were doing. We didn't understand the consequences of our choices. We thought we were protecting you, giving you space, but we see now that we were wrong. We abandoned you, and we are so sorry." I sat there, absorbing her words. Part of me wanted to burst out, to yell at them for leaving me, for making me feel invisible. But I didn't. I stayed calm, letting her words sink in. Dad, who had been silent up until that point, finally spoke up. "We've spent so many years running from the mistakes we made, but seeing you today, seeing the woman you've become, made us realize that we were wrong. We didn't give you the chance to be yourself. We took that from you, and we will regret that for the rest of our lives." I stared at them, searching their faces for any sign of sincerity, but something inside me had shifted. The anger I once felt had started to fade, replaced by a sense of peace that I hadn't known before. I took a deep breath. "I don't need an apology from you. I don't need you to fix what happened. I fixed it myself. I didn't just survive. I thrived. And I did that without you." I watched as the weight of my words hit them. They looked down, their faces flushed with shame. But this time, I didn't feel satisfaction from their discomfort. I felt relief. I don't hate you, I added, my voice softer. But I can't just go back to the way things were. We can't just erase the years that have passed. I've changed, and so have you. There was a long silence between us, but this time it wasn't uncomfortable. It was acknowledgement. We didn't need to fix the past. We just needed to accept that it had happened and move forward. I think we can start fresh, I said finally, but only if we're willing to be honest with each other from now on. They nodded, both of them, as if this was the first real conversation we had ever had in years. I didn't expect them to make up for the lost time, but I knew one thing. I didn't need them to. I had already built a life. I had already found my worth, and that was enough. The following weeks felt like a strange limbo, but there was a calm that I had never experienced before. My parents and I began to rebuild some kind of relationship, but it wasn't the same. I didn't expect it to be. The years of silence had created a distance, a wall that couldn't be torn down with a few apologies or awkward meetings. But I had found peace in knowing I was in control of my life now. My business continued to thrive. I expanded, hired a small team, and started bringing in new clients. It was a success I had earned through my own grit and determination, and as much as my parents tried to offer support, I didn't need them for that anymore. I was creating something real. Something mine. I spent less time dwelling on the past and more time looking toward the future. But even with all the success, a small part of me couldn't help but feel the hole they had left. The feeling of abandonment still lingered, a shadow that would never fully fade no matter how much I achieved. One evening, as I sat at my desk working late, my phone buzzed. It was a message from my mom. "Leah, I know it's been a while, but I'd like to meet. There's something I need to give you." I stared at the message for a while, unsure what to make of it. What could she possibly have to give me now? Was it another apology, or some gesture to make up for everything? Part of me didn't want to engage, but another part of me was curious. I had to know what she meant. I agreed to meet her the next day at a small cafe near my apartment. It was a neutral place, somewhere we could talk without the weight of history bearing down on us. When I arrived, she was already sitting at a table by the window. She looked older than I remembered, and there was something in her eyes I hadn't seen before. Vulnerability. Regret. She waved as I approached, her hands trembling slightly. "Leah," she said softly, her voice more tentative than I had ever heard it before. "Thank you for agreeing to meet." I sat down across from her, the weight of the moment hanging between us. "I wasn't sure how to start this conversation," she continued, looking at me with a mixture of sadness and determination. "But I realized I never truly understood what I did to you. I thought I was giving you space, but I see now that I was just abandoning you. I'm sorry." The words were simple, but they held so much. I had waited for years to hear this. I had waited for the acknowledgement that what happened to me mattered. And here it was. I stayed silent for a moment, letting her words sink in. It wasn't the answer I had expected, but it was the one I needed. The apology wasn't perfect, and it didn't undo the years I'd lost. But it was a start. "I understand," I said quietly. "I've made peace with what happened. I'm not the person I was when you left. I've learned to be strong on my own." My mother nodded, tears welling up in her eyes. "I know. I see it now. You're so much stronger than I ever gave you credit for, and I'm sorry it took me so long to see that." We sat in silence for a few moments. There was no need for grand gestures, no need to fix everything in one conversation. It was about acknowledgement, understanding, and moving forward. "You don't have to apologize anymore, Mom," I said softly, a sense of calm washing over me. "I've already forgiven you. Not for you, but for me." She smiled, a fragile smile, but one filled with gratitude. "Thank you," she whispered. We didn't talk much after that. There were no grand speeches, no dramatic confessions. We simply shared a moment of mutual understanding, the kind that only comes when you've both suffered and grown from it. When I left the cafe, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. The past, with all its pain and confusion, was finally where it belonged. Behind me. It's strange how full circles happen. Life doesn't always offer a neat, packaged ending, but I'd learned that endings don't need to be tied up with a bow to feel complete. Sometimes closure is a quiet, personal journey. My business continued to grow, and I moved into a new apartment with a view of the city. The place felt like mine in a way I hadn't known before. The walls didn't just hold memories of my past, they now held my victories, my peace, my choice to create a life on my own terms. As the months passed, my relationship with my parents became less strained. We spoke more often, but it wasn't forced. We no longer avoided the past. We simply acknowledged it. We shared what we had learned, the mistakes we'd made, and the ways we had all changed. And then, one evening, I received a phone call from my mother. She didn't ask for anything, didn't try to explain anything. She simply said, "I'm proud of you, Leah. You've made something amazing out of nothing. I hope you know that." I didn't need anything else. That was the closure I had been searching for. I didn't rush to forgive them, and I didn't rush to forget. The truth was, I had already done the hardest work. I had already forgiven myself. And that, in the end, was what mattered most. A week later, I received a letter in the mail. It was from my old home, my childhood home, the one that had been sold after everything happened. Inside the envelope was a key, a simple key, with a note attached that read, "This is for you. In case you ever want to come back, it'll be waiting. I don't expect anything. Just know that I love you. Always." It wasn't a grand gesture, it wasn't an apology, but it was the most important gift they could have given me. The key wasn't just for the house, it was a key to the freedom I had gained, the freedom to let go of the past and live my life on my terms. I held that key in my hand for a long time, staring at it. I didn't know if I'd ever return to that house, but I didn't need to. I had already built my own home, not in bricks and mortar, but in strength, in independence, and in the life I had created for myself. That was enough. And as I stood there in the silence of my apartment, feeling the weight of everything that had brought me here, I realized something. I wasn't defined by what they did to me. I was defined by what I did with my life after. I wasn't a victim. I was a survivor. I was a woman who had found herself no matter how hard the journey had been, and now I was finally free.